Bachelor's of Architecture from UCLA and a PhD in Architecture from University College of Dublin. Her art and architecture seeks to engage with phenomenological spatial experiences. Her PhD focused on reimagining the birth environment. She has also written several book chapters on birth environment design. She is also a co-founder of the GBEDN, Global Birth Environment Design Network, and leader of the SSHRC-funded partnership project, Transformational Change for Birth Environment Design, of which this conference/colloquium is an accumulation of. Please help me welcome Doreen to speak.
Hello, is that working? Okay. First of all, I'd like to make sure we acknowledge that this university and the work that we're doing is happening on the ancestral territories of the Mississauga, the Credit, the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabeg, and the Huron-Wendat, who are the original owners and custodians of the land on which we live, work, and create. And I'd like to further acknowledge the Toronto Birth Centre. It's been mentioned a few times here. We thought to have a tour there, possibly, but we have a very full schedule, and also we just didn't get the connections working somehow. And both Sarah Wolfe and Shirley Bourgeois, who founded the Indigenous midwifery group called Seventh Generation Midwives, who operate the Toronto Birth Centre, were, first Sarah and then Shirley, were planned to be keynote speakers for us, but both for different reasons have had to cancel and not participate because they're somewhere else. But I also want to point to this birth center as what I think is the only Indigenous urban birth center maybe in the world. And they had a wonderful story to tell about how it happened. And briefly, I'll just say, the Premier of Ontario, the province of Ontario, I think had a daughter who said, "I want a birth. We should have birth centers." And so he said, "Okay, I'm going to fund 2 birth centers in Ontario," and this was one of them. But it wasn't designated Indigenous. It was designated as, a birth center in Toronto. And the story that I was told that they were going to tell in much more detail here was that the midwives had to all get together and talk about who was going to run this birth center. It was going to be a midwifery-led birth center. And at some point in their rather tense conversations of this gathering of important midwives thinking about this, who was going to run that, the Indigenous leaders said, you really have to, this has to be an Indigenous midwifery-led birth center, Can you guys sort of, allow this to happen? Can you, and the other midwives, the groups, and there were factions and whatever, and they did. They stepped down, stepped back, and said, "Yes, let's do this. Let's support this." So that's kind of how it happened. And the picture, by the way, I'm a color person, and I hate this monitor, and I hate what it shows on there. So whatever it looks like, and you think it's horrible, you just know that I already know that. And but Christy Belcourt is the Indigenous artist that did these murals. She's a very highly respected artist in Canada, and she did these beautiful murals, which are very meaningful, and there's one in each of the birth rooms. And so anyway, but I think you can just see from these 2 images, it may not be a perfect place, and no place is perfect in our high standards of what it ought to be. But there's always something we could fix. Our architects and designers are perfectionists, and the last thing they did is no good. They have to do something better the next time. So just to say, you can see the kitchen facility, the place to cook, the place to have family, the place to, so there are certain really good things about this place. And I just wanted to acknowledge it, since we don't have the representation here in the room with us, but we should have it. And I also want to mention that Rachel Olson was going to be with us and had to cancel in the last couple of days. And Rachel runs this, she's lead of this group called Firelight. It's a indigenous research group. Saraswati has worked with them, and we saw glimpses of the kind of interesting work that they do. And Rachel also had something came up and couldn't be with us, but she has been, you might have seen her on our list of speakers. And just I want to point to the one on the right in particular, but both of these are important dots. So they do publications and they do indigenous-led research, and so there's some interesting things to explore and to know about from their work. And I think we'd dearly like to have more indigenous representation in our midst. So not just representation, but participation and advice and all those good things. And I don't know, because some of you have maybe not been to the other space yet, but I don't know if you all know this is Will Alsop's building. It was built in the time that I was here teaching, and my office was right up there in the black and white box. And so if you haven't seen it, you should just at least glimpse it on the street. It's a very interesting, crazy building. And this is my partner, Stuart Reed. This is a little advertising session. But he did this huge project in Union Station, and it's in the main subway station. So Union Station is a train station and a subway station, and there is this subway platform. This is one side of it. You can also go over the stairs onto the other side, and you're standing right next to it. It's 500 feet long. And so it's and I also think it's interesting just from the perspective of who I am, because this is an architectural glass project, a public art project, and I come from this same domain of architectural glass, which we started, in the beginnings it was stained glass, but that's a kind of a word one that didn't stop using after a while because it was too indicative of old things and little cute things people made, and it wasn't serious enough. So I'm just letting you know, you're in Toronto, and this is a really beautiful piece of work, and lots of poetic, there's poetry in it and so on that he wrote. And he wrote on the subway drawing pictures of people, and so they're all embedded in here. And then just wanted to take a moment to pay tribute, not just to Michel Audant, but to several people. So I'll just run through them pretty quickly. But Michel Audant was actually, we hoped he was going to be a guest speaker, probably online, but coming to us online. But, he is such a deep person in this discourse. So, and what a wonderful, lovely human being. So, I just wanted to take a minute to say thank you, Michel. And essentially not, he did actually design a birth environment. That was a huge step away, right? And had so many things to say about it that still resonate. And then this other aspect of his work, which is about how important this time is for all of life, and for all of the species, and reminding us that we're mammals and that we actually could think about it that way, we could understand a lot from understanding that we were also, we have all the same processes built into our systems. And I love that he wrote this. He wrote to the architects of the future, essentially. And what I like that he said, what suggestions should be made to the architects commissioned to design the maternity centers of the future? What sort of size should they be? Should there be a few huge centers welcoming thousands of people, or very small, lots of small ones handling only a few hundred births a year? Will the current angular shapes of the buildings give way to more rounded lines? In this age of concrete, even birthing places are made of materials synthesized by man. Perhaps organic materials such as clay, wood, or simple brick will be preferred. Breathing materials capable of transmitting humidity from inside to outside and vice versa. Perhaps people would be concerned about the electromagnetic environment, looking at the location of the center in relation to a nearby electrified railway or high-volume voltage cables, as well as considering the building material and the geophysical situation. And I think that's really profound and important, because we just keep thinking about this room. And to me, a room, I think as an architect, a room isn't a room isn't a room. A room is a situated thing. You can't design a room in a vacuum. It's someplace. And I always say to my students, what's out there is in here. So you put those windows there, you are bringing that in. That becomes part of our reality, part of our atmosphere. So whatever's out there, it's part of your architecture. So he understands that. And I think, what Esmond said about they're building the super hospitals, that super hospital in Denmark thinks of itself as really being focused on situating in nature. But you look out the windows of those birth rooms or any rooms, and what are you looking at? From the grand view, you could take the helicopter picture and it looks fabulous. The mist is blowing, it all looks good. We use those pictures because we want to glamorize it too, in a way, right? But just to come back again to these big seminal people, these interesting people, Frederick Leboyer was Odon's teacher or mentor. And he is the one, as Saraswati was talking about, what about the child, the infant? And he was the one who pointed there very specifically and said, hello, have you forgotten? There's somebody else who has just entered the world. What are we doing with that person? And he proved that baby could smile right then. It's not like, oh, babies don't smile till they're 3 months old. And in the course of my PhD work, I remember coming across a study that was pretty recent, and it talked about, they were testing whether babies could feel the prick in their foot, because babies can't feel anything. They don't have any feelings or emotions or nerves, So, hello. And then I just want to call out Bianca Lepori. Of course, she's been mentioned many times here, but really the first architect who picked it up and said, and she picked up what Odon was saying and said, okay, this I could, as Marta and I were just saying, it's like we got the drug. We are hooked on this topic, and you're not going to get rid of it. It's not coming out of us. We're stuck on this topic. And then Bianca Lepori, was stuck on this. She got how important it was. And I remember reading the 2007 book, Architecture from the Inside Out, sometime during my PhD work. And it's really not yet acknowledged as a book that is one of an early provider of this thinking about architecture as embodied experience, as sensory, full-on senses. And that was her, and she's very. And Karen Frank was my PhD reviewer, one of the two examiners, and she was really. And I thought she was going to get what I was doing. You'll see, but she's a sociologist, and she really didn't get when I put a bunch of pictures together and said, see, this is about this, see? Put some words on it. She wanted more writing about each one of the images so it could be translated into something she could understand, because she couldn't understand the images. And for me, the whole thing, as you will see, is all about, I'm going to put the image there and you're going to feel it and see it, and you're going to, it's embodied, right? So very interesting. And then, of course, Marilyn and Kathleen and Carolyn with this book, and then bringing Lepori's work and Dodon's work into it is, when I remember it took me a year to find that book, because I was looking at things that said, looking for keywords that, all this stuff. And birth territory wasn't the keyword I was looking for. And it was a book for midwives. And so when I found it, I just went, what? Hallelujah, So there you go. And then I just want to acknowledge, Davis Floyd is just one of the anthropologists who have contributed in this field so importantly. And I put up this long quote here. It's all about, but is the hospital necessary, says the young woman. And he says, well, what would you do if your automobile broke down on a country road? Well, she says, I'll try to fix it. Well, what if you couldn't? Well, they'd have it hauled to the garage. Exactly. That's where the trained mechanics are. And so he goes on to say that's where the hospital, and likening the whole thing to the garage. But what I love at the bottom of this is her quote that says, "As research has led me to conclude that both of these questions have the same answer. Since the early 1900s, birth in the U.S. has been increasingly conducted under a set of beliefs, a paradigm which I have labeled the technocratic model of birth. I've used the word paradigm here in the sense of both a conceptual model of and a template for reality." And I think that's what we are talking about here, is we need a paradigm shift. And so identifying that it's that kind of a seismic shift is important. We're not just doing little tinkery, cute things, And then I wanted to recognize Ellen Hodnett, who was a nurse at University of Toronto here, the head of research in nursing. And she, as you'll see in the, so this is really important, attempted a clinical trial, which didn't go forward past the pilot because the obstetricians in 2 hospitals, who, by the way, were women, shut it down, didn't allow it to proceed. She was going to set up one ambient room and do a test of, and who knows what that would have actually yielded, but I just want to point to her work, which starting in 1982, and you see the person environment, the labor agentry, so this thing of agency, personal control, home-like, pain in women's, and so on, and it just keeps on rolling. And I met her in about 2000. I started my PhD in 2011. So 2009, when she'd been writing Reconceptualizing the Birth Environment, is when I met her and actually gave her a little help on that ambient room and what the lighting should be like. And I've been trying to find her now, but I don't know, haven't been successful. But she was a real contributor, and everybody at the Normal Labor and Birth group knew her quite well, and an important person in the process. And then I'm going to slide off into our web resource. Because it's not been very featured at the exhibition, it was intended to be. All the monitors in the big room, the green room, were supposed to have this on it, and continuously, and anybody could go in there and they could be in, go and look at this. But of course, it's an opening. Nobody can sit down and get serious. But this web resource, the launch of it is, in a way, all of this is the excuse for that, the kind of celebratory moment of that website being launched. And it's the culminating piece, except it's not really done. It's in its beta stage, I'd say, where we've got something, we've got a framework, we've got an idea about how it works, but there's so much more to add to it, and there's so much more to get feedback from everyone on what's not working about it and what needs to be added. But for a moment. Let's see if I can show it to you live. But the concept of this is that we decided we needed to, in our research group, what did we need to accomplish? And we decided that we needed to speak to architects and designers and get them, answer some of their questions about, well, what should we be designing? How should we be designing? And that architects need visuals. You can't just write about it. And there are all these papers. Over there, there's 70 papers or so. But almost none of them have pictures in them. And I don't mean pictures like little tiny, sometimes they have little like, oh, look, there's some wood, or something. But it's not enough, right? Architects, we're serious about this. There's a lot of stuff we need to know. So, so the website, tells you what this is, where it's funded by, who we are. There's a place where you can go to the Global Birth Environment Design Network website. I'm not going to go there now. It tells you a little bit about what we did and that we went to do case studies. And we wanted to share positive exemplar built projects. And it's hard to find ones you could all agree on. So what were the criteria? Well, ultimately the criteria was that we went, yeah, that one, I mean, yes, we have lists and charts and thousands of things, but ultimately, if we all said, yeah, that one. And we weren't working with lots of imagery, but we had something to work with that people had posted online and so on, and so we could see images. And if you just Google, birth environment design, you will find, or birth unit design or whatever, you'll find thousands of horrible images of, just all those places that people have shown. And there aren't very many to choose from in there that you say, oh, that one, that looks good. But you can begin to do that. That's the random way to do it. But we also knew people and places. And so I should say, and then we developed a framework. Well, how do we think about this? And I think overarchingly we said salutogenic design, came to it after some, yes, it's all about, not treating things as crises, medicine, but as health creation, and really fundamentally that's what we're doing. And then there's some stuff about, and then there's all of us down here. But just to show you quickly what case studies, so we've got, I think we said we'd do 5, or maybe we said we'd do 3, but we have about 10 in the bag, like all the stuff. We've been there, 11? We have 11 now. Sometimes there are 3 of them in Spain, that's because we knew Marta and Angela and connected with them, and Angela took us around to pointed us at these places and helped arrange the visits and so on. It's really important to have people, that you can work with. So, so Terra Alta was the first one. I'll just go there for a second. I took that picture. We took these pictures. Grace and I took pretty much all these pictures, I think. And Terra Alta is one of these places that has a lot more than a room, And it's the most beautiful environment. So first of all, we start with this, just a little slideshow of the place, and then we give you some information, and there are things you can click on, to go see the architects and so on. And over here, there's more information and more things to click on, and it tells you a little bit about it and how it's situated in the healthcare system, and how the local hospital is a 6-minute drive away, and so on. And then we have some architectural drawings, and then we have some site setting images, so we kind of know, this is where we are in the world, and this is why they are who they are, and why they've done what they've done. And for me, the most exciting thing about Terra Alta is it really highlighted the power of siting and of setting, and of that business of where is this in the world and how is it related? Because to me, that's a very important aspect of architecture, and it set things up so beautifully. So anyway, I'm just going to quickly show you. It goes through a little bit of showing you the pieces. Here's the reception area. Here's the fitness room. Oh, it's not really a fitness room. It's the multi-purpose room. It's where all the prenatal stuff goes on. During COVID, they split it in two. They have a sliding wall thing, and they were able to have testing and segregating of people so they could still have all their prenatal and postnatal things. The most beautiful dining room. We asked them if they used those little sling things for the babies. Oh yes, and the baskets. And the birth rooms. And so in each one of these you can scroll through and see more pictures of the things. By the way, this one I love because that looks like a little tiny sofa. You know what that is? It's a bedside thing for the baby, right? So you don't have to crush the baby, worry about that. Baby is pulled right up to the bed and right next to you, but you can roll over and not worry, and so on. So anyway, all of these rooms, and then I haven't shown you our framework yet, but it is based on this ICF framework, issues, concepts, forms. And so the issues are a set of, that's over in the framework section, but this part of it's organized in that way too, because the user experience is really the issues. And then those lead to concepts that architects, evolve based on the issues, what people have told them and what they, wrong. The user experience is really the F part of the ICF. It's like the architecture. And forms is kind of a dumb word for it because it's not just form, it's atmosphere, and it's all of that. So you learn in here about what people said. And so our interviews with midwives, with women, with doctors, with architects, the architects have their own section, but you'll see mothers and partners and quotes from them, taken from our interview transcripts. So there's that. And I believe when you get down to the bottom of that, you can move on to the concepts piece with the architect. And so then these are quotes from the architect paired with images. And then when you get down to the bottom of that, you can look at the issues, which are excerpts from the interview with the founder, midwife. These are all quotes from her. So all of this is quotes, and then there's a lot to digest here, right? Time, yeah, I know. So that's the website, and there's more to understand, and there's more case studies, and we will be developing more case studies over time, and we'll try to figure out clever ways of doing that where somebody could just submit one now that we know the process and the ways of doing it. And since I apparently have only a few minutes left, we might get to my work then. And hopefully the timekeeper will be a little lenient with the time. Because that wasn't my presentation yet. That was just everything else. Okay. So if I whip through this, excuse me. But, oh dear, I hope I don't have the wrong presentation open here. I do. Maybe. Yeah, I do. Hang on. Close this. Well.
Oh, so it needs the over here display.
Hmm?
It's from the display.
It's gone off?
No, it's
It's the wrong presentation, but I will have to live with it. No, I don't know.
Is it on?
Is it on? Okay. Well, this is me. This is my website, which kind of would clue you in if you looked at it to the fact that I'm not really a researcher. I'm an artist. I'm not really even a designer. I'm an artist, but I have 2 degrees in architecture, so I guess I'm a designer. I have designed many things and some in a house and in lots of rooms and things. But I'm sorry. This is totally the wrong presentation because I have a habit of working on my presentation to the last minute, sometimes even in the audience. And so I have a different one than this that I was working on just before. So I have to, this one. Now, do you have to do something again? Slideshow?
Yeah.
But I don't want to see this. Yeah.
Can you see it?
Yeah, but I don't want to see this. I just want to see. No, I don't want to see this display. Sorry, Nick, you had it all set up for me. I've done bad things.
Here.
Okay. Okay, but now we have to flip through all this stuff. Close your eyes. Okay, here we are. So that's me. And some of you have seen this kind of stuff over in the gallery. And you're like, what is this? What does this have to do with anything, you know? This is my most recent little exploratory work I did for an exhibition in Austria. And when you look at these, you need to know, no, it's not working?
Don't worry about it.
You need to know that I play with things, and that's how I learn about things. So my PhD was based on this kind of stuff. Not very serious, you might think, but I think it's really serious. So when you see these things, depending on the light, they might work or not work, but there's always something going on, and I'm very attuned to the sensitive stuff that's going on with the light and as you'll see. So the pink is coming from the curved piece of paper that you see that looks white to you, but on the other side it's pink, so it's casting. So you can see I'm playing with, and I have to say that when I'm doing this, I am thinking subconsciously about birth spaces, shall we say. It's, as Marta and I said, it's a drug. We can't get it out of our systems. So, and to this point of privacy that's come up, I think privacy is one of the biggest issues that's not resolved yet whatsoever in birth space design. There's no privacy. And what Marta said the other day about, okay, make a room for sex, like, sure, you're going to make the man watch some sex movies or something, right? So, like, why not? So this notion that birth is this privacy piece, we talk about it all the time, but so I'm always trying to make a place a private place. And you'll see this over and over again. And then what could that private place be like? And then I'm also just really interested in the cycles of light and what changes. And you can't see this all day long. It doesn't exist. It only exists for a few minutes or, half an hour in the space. And here's a little sequence of, in a gallery space, just I set pieces of colored glass up there and a few sticks painted white. And long ago when I first started teaching color at the college here, I had to learn about colored shadows because I saw them, I didn't know what they were, but you always get complementary shadows to the light, the color of the light. And so when you think about that, you think about the richness you can create. So in this case, you've got 2 shadows coming from there's actually some blue light over there and so on. So we have 2 different colored shadows going on. So you can make a very rich thing with very simple things because of this. And this is, of course, this is the atmosphere kind of stuff. So this was in an exhibition called Now You See It, Now You Don't. And how I started thinking about birth spaces for the PhD was that I started with birth and death places, and I wanted to I thought we don't do those very well. And I kind of had forgotten that long ago I'd done a master's degree and I had designed a freestanding birth center attached to a freestanding health center. And I had done that in architecture school because I had a child in the middle of architecture school. And there's a little bit about that in that Toronto Star article, if you've seen it. And so I thought this was happening just, sometime. This was one of the articles that I thought was really interesting. It was the first time I think anybody asked women about what they wanted or, anything about the environment. I thought it was really significant. And of course, and it had lots of significant other details in it that I've never really heard anybody talk about. But there were C-section reduction rates from women being allowed to walk around and so on. And I don't know if anybody's ever tried to duplicate any of that. But I thought it was really significant. And in the early days of my PhD work, I really did find this anthropological work interesting, but I was always looking for who's talking about the actual architecture, like something I can grab onto about the architecture. And Sheila Kitzinger has, these books. And I think in Rediscovering Birth, these words, I just picked words out of the stream of consciousness she was doing, talking, and they're words that work for architects, right? I get it. Here are some things that we could think about that point us to what happened, what was before. And I think I didn't come across, this was really important. So this surveillance and sanctum space, which we've heard something about. But then I'm really interested in, A, the room itself, B, the unit or the center as a whole, what's in it, what's not in it, and then the whole ecological setting, all of that. And so all of those things to me are important, not just designing a room. And so for me, we've heard a lot about, people have said the word felt or felt experience quite a bit in the last 2 days. And I think felt experience is, the other fancy word for it is embodied experience, and some people have used those words. And to me, those things are at the heart of the whole business here. And these are explorations from my PhD. I just get in the room and make stuff. I'm not even making stuff. I'm just kind of picking up, things and doing something with them. And then I think, what is that about? And then I put labels on it. And it turns out that I'm thinking about lots of things, and my hands make things, or my intuition says, pick up that piece of paper. Oh, make it curved. Use that one that's got pink on it. Put that on the inside. Put it on the outside. Try. And there are at one point in the PhD, I was making this image bank, and I wanted to label every day, every one, put the timestamp on it, and show you how many thousands of things I worked through, but I gave up at a certain point. I wasted lots of time doing this PhD. And through it, just at the end of it, I did this work with Crowther and Hall on spirituality. But, they had written an article about 3 existential qualities of spirituality at the start of life. So these are really beautiful and important, and I completely concur with them. Spatiality, temporality, embodied relationality. So what's playing over in the gallery are some kind of version of this, visual excerpts from my PhD. There's lots of writing and way too much of it, and I'm not, but importantly, this is my theoretical framework, and I really searched all around the architectural domain, and I don't think Garneau Bohm was really, maybe, he wasn't in my realm of consciousness, but this notion of atmosphere, architecture as atmosphere is right there in it, but I didn't utilize or know of his work at the time. And of course, you're working your way in your PhD to something that will you'll name it at the end. Certainly in my case, I didn't name it at the beginning. I wanted to do birth and death spaces, then I had to get down to birth spaces, and then reluctantly I had to get down to light and birth spaces, because that's what I knew the most about, and had to limit it, and nobody else was doing it. And nobody else even thought it was important. So why do you need light? Why do you need to talk about natural light? I'm not a lighting person like this. I'm a natural light person. So why do you need natural light in birth spaces? You don't. It's nighttime, it's dark, et cetera, et cetera. But I figured out pretty early on that, you know, I had 2 12-hour births, and I guess that would mean that I might have seen both sunrise and sunset, and sunrise and sunset are the best natural light in the world, and they're the most emotional, and they are full of resonance and meaning. So I discovered these two people in the phenomenological world, but Maurice Merleau-Ponty and James J. Gibson wrote about 25 years apart from each other, Merleau-Ponty in France, James Gibson in the US, and I highly recommend their works, except Merleau-Ponty's almost unreadable. He's really, really difficult to read, but I found the pieces in it, kind of like I did with Kitzinger, and I just would go, aha, and I'd pull out this sentence about light, or about, there's beautiful things like he talks about how we perceive materiality by all kinds of cues of what, so for example, a little bird lights on a birch branch, and you can tell how you can tell about that materiality by the amount of flecks in that branch and so on. So just these cues are always with us, and that the two of them are called the sort of grandfathers of embodiment theory. This notion that mind, body, and environment can't be separated. And the environment includes not just this stuff, it includes me, and includes all of you. You're in it, and you change it. And it's relational. So that embodied relationality too, right? And midwives talk about that a lot in their most interesting exchanges with the women, right? It's really embodied perceptual work between the two. And so, and Gibson's work was all in this language of, it was all about perception for both of them, and they were really talking about how do we perceive. Gibson was really focused on the eye and what it was doing, but it's not just an eye, it's an eye in a head that swivels like this, on a body that moves like this, on a bipedal, like there's really specificity to it. And he talks about this visual array, and he goes into great detail about how it works. And the main thing is that the animal can't be separated from the environment. The animal is part of the environment, and the environment's part of the animal. It was made for that environment. And both of these guys got their ideas from somebody named von Uexküll, who was a biologist who talked about all the different animals and their perceptions and creatures, and how each one of them, their perceptual system is made for so a shark, you know, what do they see, ultraviolet light, and so on, insects, all of that. He talked about all of that. And von Uexküll goes back to Goethe, and Goethe was all about perception, the best instruments we have are ourselves and our attention and our eyes. And our eyes are, have you ever noticed that your eyes are actually better than a camera at adjusting? Try to take a picture of stained glass window in a cathedral. You will either get the space or you will get the window. You won't get both, but your eye can get both. So what is that? That's interesting. So, and Gibson, and both of them really were talking also about why do we perceive? What are we trying to do with it? How does this work? And they said it's not, you can't measure what goes on and understand it by setting somebody in a laboratory and showing them things and then getting reaction. Because perception is perception in motion, and it's purposeful. So Gibson is the one who invented the word affordance, and an affordance means something that you can do something with. So a window is an affordance for looking out of, but if it was open, it could be affordance for falling to your death, if you were a small child. So affordances change depending on who you are, what size you are, what your capacities are, and they can be positive or negative. They've been taken up by the tech world, and so affordances are now things like, pushing buttons and so on. But his work is profound. He talks about the way our perception is organized by the cycles of light and so on. So it's super important, and I know I've gone way over now and haven't shown you anything yet, but I really wanted to tell you about those two people. And so you can see here, I've got my creative practice, I've got embodiment theory, I've got perceived needs, and I'm coming to some derived principles. And I do things like this along the way to just, try to figure out what's at play in all of this. This one on the left is a much later one where you see the word Venustas situated in the middle. That's the term from Vitruvius, the first writer we have on, the first treatise on architecture we have. And Venustas was, there was utilitas, you can understand what that is, utility, functionality. Commoditas, which is comfort, essentially, all of that stuff. And Venustas is all the properties of Venus, the goddess, Venus. And Venustas is perfect for birth space and place because Venustas means all of the other stuff, all the aesthetic stuff, everything, the harmony, the structure, the rhythms of architecture, and all of it. And so Venustas is about the beauty, the harmony, the sexuality, the sensuality, the power of all of that, delight. It was translated as delight in the first translation of it. And so now I'm going to really whip you through just to get to my end principles, but you're just whamming you with a bunch of images. So I started in my studio with the kind of things I would make my students do. So it's like, okay, you have 30 minutes, go into the studio, and I want you to make a 3-piece suite of works of any kind you want. And I want to see it at the end of 30 minutes. Go. And so that's what I made. They're watercolors. I painted things, and then I put pieces of tracing paper over them and tore that and did this and that. Anyway, and I think they mean different things, and I think there's something about the birth experience. And then this was probably the second thing I did. It was kind of like a little programmatic thing. What do we need in here? Nature, water, sky, cosmological, space, joyful, sensual, walking space, communal, cloister-like, biophilic, multisensory, sun, active, emotive, etc. And then this thing is what we call a conceptual model. I always make my students make a conceptual model at the beginning of a project. They've already done some research on it. They know kind of what the topic is. And then they just have to, again, go make something. Come to the next class with a conceptual model that represents, that embodies what something about this project. And what you get from that is a kind of something deep, that's like, and if it's not, they have to go back and do it again. But this model, which was made of found things in my studio and from outside, stayed with me in that studio for at least 2 years during probably 4 or 5 years, and just sat in the same place. And it changes all the time, and it does different things, and it tells you different things. And I never tried to articulate what those were. But you can see they're the complementary shadows of the rocks. You see the orangey glow. I don't know what you can see in these images. It looks better here. Always looks better here than there. But and things like this, because long ago I had figured out that if I made a painting on the wall, and if I held out a piece of paper here, that color was over here too. It wasn't just over there. It was in the room. So that was like a long ago in my own experience of artwork. I went, but the room is now called the atmosphere. The air is, and you can't see it till I put something there. And that's what all these experiments that you see over there. Take it away, you won't see that color. But and then I began making things like, to me, this was like, well, what if you had a really different kind of entry, and you were walking down a corridor that looked like this, tube, and sky tube or something, and there was something interesting at the end that looked exhilarating. And what if you came to work every day in the midwifery, unit, and you walked through such a thing, or you were a doctor? What would you bring with you? So I would make a thing like this, and I would think, oh yeah, that. I would have these thoughts. So, or then you would arrive, and there'd be a little reflecting pool with these. I don't know if those things are actual plant material or if they're sculptural things. I don't know. I don't really care right now. I'm just going, what if you arrived at a reflecting pool courtyard? What if that was your entry into the birth center? And so I just made things and went, wow, what if that was part of your experience, or that? I don't know what that is, but it looks good, This definitely was about starting to think, I'm going to walk around in this place, and what's it feel like walking around in it? Those corridors, those hallways, no. What about more like there are these rooms, and they're floating in a space that you walk through like a cloistered courtyard kind of thing. This is just about the thing sat there in the same place, and I photographed it many more than 2 times, but there you go. There's 2 nice dramatic, and how the different materials react to the light, and how serendipitous things happen. The blinds, paper blinds over there had little holes for the string, and they do that. Well, that's cool, and just the way, just the play of beauty and delight and fertility and I guess I'm just responding. I'm not showing you everything I made or stuck somewhere or photographed. I'm just showing you a few of the ones that really resonated in the end. This one, I'm thinking about perception but movement. You're walking. The thing is fluid. You're walking, and it's all, it's not just a picture. You're walking, and you can see the trees moving. And why don't I give you an experience like that so you feel like walking? Otherwise, why should you walk? This was thinking about, okay, I'm in a box. I gotta get up out of. I don't want to be in a bed, but I don't know what to do with myself. Well, I could kind of picture in this that if we're room-sized, I might walk around. I'd be able to walk around in circles and stuff, and just have a place to walk, not in the corridor outside the birth room, where nobody wants me. But there's also dark and light here, and I can choose to put my pillows in the dark space or the light space, or I could lie down in one of these spaces, if I just had a bunch of pillows or something. So here I'm thinking about modular units, and where are the entries, and how do I get into 2 spaces? So the first one's more public and the second one's more private. And also just just using my body and going, yeah, this would be good. This feels good. And this one on the right is, the one on the left was a piece of milkweed pod I picked up on the sidewalk outside my house. And this one is, again, another, let's think about the flipped rooms. And I'm thinking about a more private area that's for bathing and a more public, but always trying to block. So there's no such thing as you can open the door and see in. So you can see I'm blocking and screening, even in this kind of little diagram. And there's more of that, and there's another what I think of as a good entry space. And this is kind of a courtyard idea where I started thinking about curved buildings and cloister spaces. And this, I'm thinking about the materiality of that facade and these weird openings that are not like doors. And then I had to have real doors. And then I could put this screen of glass stuff in front and make it really weird and organic. This, I'm thinking about bathing and the sensuality of bathing. This, I'm thinking about what I came to call this little thing the cave room. And I used it a lot as you'll see. And then one day I got tired of being down in the studio and trying to photograph things from below, like concocting these ways that I could go like this, and I could look at the space from being inside it. And so I went up onto the roof. This is my house at Lake Huron, and that's a farmer's field over there. But I made this. I had a guy build this for me, and it has a hole in it, so I can photograph from underneath it, and have this frame, and I can hang things on it. And so you'll see that. And then I took a detour and went to UCD. They had a thing called the Skylab, and you could put things in it and tell it where you were in the world and what time of day it was and all that, and you could do all kinds of tests. And so I did tests of courtyard shapes, and I came up with this one, which is a Vesica Pisces shape, and it does look like certain female sort of things. And then I also was exploring a kind of egg shape, and so these are plan details, like you're looking at a plan of a birth center now. So I just kind of roamed through. So this is like a cloister-like thing. I don't know if you know what a cloister is, but it's a courtyard in a monastery, and it has a covered walkway around and these columns that when the light and it's really a solar clock, the whole thing, because it just the sun maps around it and does beautiful things. So if you think about this as a birth center on the top of a roof of a hospital, then you might get close to what I was starting to think about. So there's 2 elevators there on the left one with the stairs up at the top, and you can go inside. You can walk inside, or you can walk out in the covered courtyard, or you can go outside to where the reflecting pool is. And everybody's got a balcony around the outside edges. And down at the bottom tip here, which is the south end in Toronto, the moon rises over there. So that's the moon viewing platform, because I figured that might be nice, because I'd once been in Japan and seen moon viewing platforms and gone, oh, yeah. So these things that are residual in your brain from other experiences, they're embedded in this. I don't even know that I'm using them. And so here I mapped this onto 3 or 4 hospitals, like to scale. And I went, because one day I was looking for, okay, I've got to design something, but I don't have a site. Where's my site? I can't design anything without a site. And I went to Toronto General Hospital, where I had my second child, and I went up to the top floor, and I discovered that they were really wasting the most incredible space up there. And I thought, on the roof, separate elevator, never go through emerge? Come on. You can pay for an elevator. You can pay for all those NICU units and doctors and C-sections. You can pay for an elevator that thousands of people will use, and they don't have to go into the hospital at all, but they're at the hospital, and they're on the roof, and guess what? They're connected to this kind of stuff. And so, just explorations, and you can see it's all about these are just 3 separate shots, but, over seconds, the light changes sometimes, or sometimes it doesn't change much at all. And I remember the day that I did this stuff, the wind was blowing, and I put these pieces there that were not supposed to billow like this, and then they went in the wind, and I went, billowing. Wow, that's a thing. That feels, I can feel that with my body. And so and there's the sunset. There's a lovely day. And then these are some of the things I made up there and photographed. And then I started trying to refine this room. And you'll always see the cave room. It's in the middle of that one on the right. There's a cave room and there's a bathing space. And so I just fooled around with trying to, first I thought maybe this cave room could break up into different pieces of wall that could just be pulled apart or put together, so you could make the private space wherever you wanted, whenever you wanted, and take it away. That's still a good idea. And then what happened was these pieces got taken into a 3D scanner, and they became these pieces. And there was always the idea of a private balcony. So this little funny thing on the end is the private balcony, and there's the cave room. And you see what the cave room does really well is you can see the entry to this room. You can't come into this room and see anybody. the woman could be in the cave room, but she could also be on the other side of the cave room, or almost anywhere in that part of the thing, and nobody can see her. She can do whatever she wants, and so her partner. And so then, just experiments with, but the bathing space had to be over there where, again, blocked from view, but you could see out to the balcony, to the green space. And these were kind of, I tried to do a VR thing. It was a disaster, but these are from that, building it so that we could go into a VR thing. But the general idea, too, about some of the and I'm going to end very soon, this notion that one side is light and one side is dark. So when I come to my principles about light, one of them is use gradation to create destination, even, to create this kind of smooth flow, the flow state thing. But give me some choice. I can go into the dark spaces here and back out to the light whenever I want. And I can walk round and around this room, circulate. And somebody can sleep over in the dark corner on a benchy thing that's there, and so on. And then I inserted some of my glass stuff just for fun, but also for one of the principles. So these are the principles. I'm going to show you a slide each of one of them. Connection to cosmos, interplay between light and surface, rich threshold between inside and out, modulation, gradation of light for sensual flow, color to create vividness and depth, and spatial aliveness through use of light. So you've seen that. So here's facilitate awareness of cosmos. This is what I'm talking. That's what I mean. And with each one of these, there's like a half a page or a page or something of writing that qualifies all this for you and gives you more understanding. But this phenomenological play between light and surface, it just makes things interesting and makes them atmospheric as well. And then make the threshold between inside and out experientially rich, whatever that is. So I would say in the slide Marilyn showed you where they had all the big windows, fine to have all the big windows, just put beautiful screens and things there so that and make it so they can close it and open it as they wish and so on, and make multi-layers. In Terra Alta, you'll see this. They'll have 2 layers, one shears. Everybody does this in their house, right? Shears and then blackout curtains, or maybe 3 levels, right? Blackout, nice textural, thick material, and one that's about shears. You do that, and you've got it covered, and such beautiful things happen to the light. And then develop modulation and gradation. You can see what you can do with gradation to make spaces that feel private and safe and dark. And I found that, the question about color, I remember talking to Marilyn once about it, and she said, well, everybody wants to know what color to make the rooms, but nobody knows. And I just say, you need some strength. You need, power. You don't want just it's all pink. Sometimes you like delicate things too, I would never say pink was my favorite color, but I really love pink roses. And a really beautiful pink room could be great. I just don't want it there all the time. So developing spatial aliveness. What can you do to make things happen in the space? So aliveness in my doctoral stuff, in the research, I found it over and over, and that word in the writings of so many people. And if you think about it, what we've been doing with architecture is making it dead. Look at here. Look at this. There's nothing alive, to Anka's point, and to Martina's point. So even with things that aren't alive themselves, you can make aliveness. And so, the phenomenology of things and places is also the phenomenology of light. And the body is our general medium for having a world. And I have lots more excellent quotes, but I think that's where I'm going to land for now. Thanks.
Thank you,